She placed her black leather backpack beneath seat 1A, dressed in simple jeans and a blazer. Within seconds, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "This is first class, ma'am." No welcome, no smile, just suspicion. Ruth Emerson didn't flinch, but what the crew didn't know was that she wasn't just a passenger. She was the CEO of the very airline they worked for, and in the next 12 minutes, their careers would unravel on camera. If you've ever been told you didn't belong, this story is for you, because sometimes quiet power speaks loudest. Ruth Emerson stepped into the cabin with the quiet grace of someone who had walked through storms and come out stronger. Her short, silver-streaked curls framed a face lined not by age, but by wisdom and endurance. She wore tailored dark jeans, a crisp white blouse, and a black blazer, understated, dignified. No designer logos, no flash, just presence. She paused for a moment at the threshold of first class, scanning the plush leather seats before spotting hers. 1A. With calm precision, she wheeled her modest carry-on down the aisle and slid her black leather backpack under the seat. A few glances flicked her way from the nearby passengers, not warm ones. Before she could even lower herself into the seat, a voice rang out like a warning bell. "Excuse me, ma'am." It was sharp, cold, dismissive. "This is first class. You can't leave that there." Ruth looked up. The speaker was a woman in her late 30s, tall, lean, and tight-jawed. Blonde hair tied into a no-nonsense bun. Her name tag read, Angela Green, lead flight attendant. "There are protocols," Angela added, as if Ruth were violating something sacred. "You'll need to store that in the overhead bin, immediately," Ruth replied with calm authority. "It contains sensitive electronics. I'd prefer to keep it under the seat, which is where I'm sitting, 1A. Angela didn't even glance at the boarding pass Ruth held up. Behind her, a man's voice snapped. "I don't feel comfortable with bags on the floor, especially with that size." The voice came from 1B, Mr. Hayden, silver-haired, in a suit too sharp for a casual flight. His wife, Mrs. Hayden, nodded vigorously, whispering, "She's clearly confused." Angela took their cue. "Ma'am," she said again, "you need to check your ticket. This cabin is for our elite-tier passengers." Ruth raised one brow. "I am an elite-tier passenger?" Angela's lips tightened. "May I see your boarding pass?" Without hesitation, Ruth handed it over, printed clearly, in bold letters, Seat 1A, First Class. Angela scanned it. Her expression didn't change. Instead, she walked over to the tablet in the service console, tapped a few times, then frowned dramatically. "It's not appearing in the system," she announced to no one in particular. "We're going to need to verify this." Behind Ruth, Mrs. Hayden sighed loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "This is what happens when they start letting just anyone buy upgrades. Standards are falling." A low murmur passed through the rows like a ripple. No one stepped in. No one said, "She has a right to be here." Just silence, the kind that echoes louder than words. Angela returned with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ms. Emerson, is it? There seems to be a glitch. We may need to reseat you temporarily while we confirm your reservation." Ruth remained standing. Her voice was calm, but steel-lined. "There's no glitch. My reservation was confirmed this morning. Seat 1A, paid in full." Angela's smile tightened. "I understand, but—" "No, you don't," Ruth interrupted evenly. "What you see is a black woman in seat 1A, and that's what's making you uncomfortable." Angela's face flushed. "That is not—" she began, but was cut off by a second attendant, Bethany Clark, stepping in, holding a device. Bethany, younger and more nervous, barely glanced at Ruth before whispering something to Angela. Angela's eyes darted to the Haydens. Then she turned back. "I'm afraid we'll have to ask you to move to economy until this is sorted. Please don't make this difficult." A phone camera clicked somewhere behind them. Elijah Brooks, sitting silently in 2A, angled his phone just right to record the exchange. His face stayed neutral, but his thumb was already hovering over the upload button. He whispered into the mic, "Black woman kicked out of first class, even with a ticket." Angela motioned to the overhead bin. "You can retrieve your bag before relocating." Ruth didn't budge. "You want me to move because your system glitched?" "No, I'll stay right here while you fix your system." Angela exhaled sharply, clearly frustrated she wasn't getting immediate compliance. She turned to Bethany, murmured something again, and walked briskly toward the front of the cabin. At that exact moment, Mrs. Hayden leaned over and hissed, "This isn't a protest, it's a flight. You people always make it about race." Ruth turned slightly, not even giving her a full glance. "What people?" But before the woman could respond, Elijah's voice cut in low but clear. "It's all on camera." Bethany's voice came from behind. "Security has been contacted. If you won't cooperate, we'll have to escort you off the plane." The murmur in the cabin grew louder. A man in 3C leaned toward his seatmate. "This doesn't feel right," he muttered. Angela returned with a phone in hand, her tone now laced with bureaucratic authority. "Ms. Emerson, if you refuse to move, you will be removed from the aircraft. Please don't escalate this." Ruth sat down, calmly, deliberately. She crossed one leg over the other and folded her hands over her knee. "Escalation," she said quietly, "would be you dragging me off this plane for sitting in a seat I paid for." Angela opened her mouth, then closed it. Her grip on the phone tightened. Another voice, a new one, coming from the rear galley, rang out. "Is there a problem up here?" It was the captain, Tom Whitaker, stepping into the cabin, eyes scanning the aisle. "Let's resolve this quickly, we're behind schedule." Angela quickly briefed him, spinning the situation as passenger disruption. Tom's gaze landed on Ruth. "I'm going to need you to cooperate, ma'am." Ruth didn't blink. "I suggest you look at the name on that ticket before you finish that sentence." Ruth Emerson sat still, the soft leather of seat 1A molding around her like the throne it was, one she'd earned, not inherited. Her eyes didn't flinch as the captain hovered above her, waiting for her to rise. She simply tilted her head and said with a coolness only decades of navigating boardrooms could produce, "Please verify." Captain Whitaker frowned. "Verify what?" "My seat, my name, my presence," she replied. "Because unless you've removed me from the manifest in the last 5 minutes, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He hesitated. Angela Green stepped in, holding her service tablet. "Her ticket's scanned, but she's not showing up in our live system. It might be a sync error." "Might be," Ruth echoed. "Or might be something else entirely." Whitaker scratched his chin. "Ms. Emerson, we don't want a scene." "Then stop staging one," she said flatly. Angela's nostrils flared. Bethany Clark, hovering nearby with the air of someone wishing she were anywhere else, looked down at her own tablet. "Seat 1A is currently marked vacant," Bethany said after a pause. "No passenger assigned." Ruth leaned back slightly, voice low. "Interesting. I checked in at the terminal, got my boarding pass printed, walked through security, no issues, and yet I'm invisible the moment I sit down." Elijah Brooks, still seated across the aisle in 2A, kept his phone low but steadily aimed. His video was already uploading to a second platform. He whispered to his mic, "Now she's not in the system at all. Total erasure. Someone's playing games." The Haydens, seated behind Ruth, exchanged smug glances. "I told you it didn't feel right," Mrs. Hayden said loudly. "Some kind of scam, I bet." Mr. Hayden grunted in agreement. "Probably a last-minute upgrade. Or worse, a fake ticket." Ruth ignored them. She turned her gaze to Bethany. "Tell me, when exactly was this manifest updated?" Bethany blinked. "What?" "The flight manifest. When was it last refreshed?" Bethany stammered. "It's a live system. Updates continuously." Ruth gave a knowing nod. "Then someone manually removed my record." Angela scoffed. "That's impossible. Only supervisory-level staff have that kind of access." "Exactly," Ruth said. "So it wasn't a glitch. It was a choice." Captain Whitaker shifted uncomfortably. Let's not jump to conclusions. Ruth didn't move. I'm not. I've seen this before. Angela crossed her arms. Ma'am, we need to resolve this. If you won't relocate, we may have to involve ground security. Bethany's tablet suddenly chimed. She glanced down, then froze. What is it? Angela asked. Bethany looked up slowly. Someone just accessed the flight record. There's an internal note. Passenger Emerson flagged. Confirm eligibility. Time stamped 7 minutes ago, right after she boarded. Angela grabbed the tablet. Who flagged it? Bethany hesitated. Doesn't say. The user ID is masked. Ruth smiled faintly. And yet here we are, discussing whether I belong. Elijah leaned forward slightly. Sounds like sabotage. Angela shot him a glare. This doesn't concern you. Oh, it concerns all of us now, Elijah said, louder this time. Especially the 10,000 people already watching this stream. Angela paled. The cabin shifted again, not physically, but atmospherically. Passengers started murmuring, whispering, looking up from their devices. The air thickened, like a storm waiting to break. Let me make this easy for you, Ruth said, turning back to the captain. I'm Ruth Emerson, CEO of Vanguard Airlines. I hold 18% of the company's shares, sit on the Executive Oversight Committee, and am directly responsible for in-flight policy. You don't have to like that, but you will respect it. Captain Whitaker blinked. That can't be, Angela burst out. If that were true, we'd know. Bethany stared at Ruth, the recognition dawning slowly. Wait, Ruth Emerson? As in the new audit chair? The one from the congressional hearings? Ruth nodded. The same. Bethany took a step back, stunned. Angela stood her ground. I don't care who you say you are. You're not in the system. Until I see proof. You already saw proof, Ruth said. It was on my boarding pass. You just didn't believe it. From her seat in 1A, she reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a laminated ID card. She held it up. It bore the Vanguard Airlines logo, her photo, and the words, Executive Oversight, Immediate Access Authorization. Angela's face went slack. Elijah's phone caught every second. The captain cleared his throat. We'll double-check the manifest. No need, Ruth said. My assistant is already contacting the board. Expect a call within the next 3 minutes. As if on cue, Bethany's radio crackled. Board office to Flight 317. We need confirmation of current cabin activity. Please respond. Angela hesitated, then clicked her headset. Flight 317 here. We have a minor seating issue. It's being resolved. Another crackle. Please clarify. Is Executive Oversight present on board? Angela swallowed. Yes, confirmed. The voice replied coldly. Then stand down. All in-flight decisions now fall under EO protocol. Further escalation will trigger investigation. Bethany looked like she'd seen a ghost. Angela turned to Ruth, her voice suddenly soft. Why didn't you just say something earlier? Ruth stood slowly. Because I shouldn't have to. That's the whole point. Captain Whitaker stood stiffly, arms crossed just beneath his navy lapels, eyes fixed on Ruth as if sizing up a threat that didn't fit the profile in his flight training manual. Ma'am, if your presence continues to disrupt boarding, we may have to request you deplane for further verification. Ruth didn't blink. Her gaze was steady, unimpressed. Her fingers moved subtly beneath her blazer sleeve, tapping twice against the thin band nestled near her wrist, a barely visible Bluetooth communicator embedded in a smart cuff. I'd advise you not to escalate this, she replied calmly, and certainly not based on optics. The captain tilted his head. Excuse me? Exactly, Ruth said. From the outside, she looked composed. Inside, the pressure simmered. She'd known, when she chose to fly anonymously today, that she was inviting risk. But she hadn't expected this level of overt hostility, nor the rapid coordination it would take to erase her from the system. This wasn't a mistake. It was a maneuver. Bethany stepped back, clearly rattled by the executive order in her earpiece. Angela clenched her jaw, glancing between Ruth and the growing group of passengers whispering among themselves. Meanwhile, Elijah Brooks's phone continued recording steadily. On his live stream, comments exploded. "She's the CEO." Racist staff caught in 4K. "OMG, is this real time?" "Wait, she's not yelling. They are." Ruth shifted slightly in her seat. "Whitaker," she said, this time using his name without the captain prefix. "You're aware that as executive oversight, I carry monitoring privileges on all domestic Vanguard flights, correct?" He blinked. "Those protocols require prior declaration before boarding." "No," she cut in. "They require clearance, which I have." With a subtle flick of her wrist, Ruth tapped a sequence into her cuff. The signal pinged instantly through a private, encrypted channel. In a conference room hundreds of miles away, a red light blinked on. Across 3 time zones, 5 board members stopped mid-call and turned toward the screen at the end of their table. "Feed initiated," Chloe Ross said, adjusting her earpiece as she patched into the hidden cabin camera mounted above the galley door. The video feed lit up. Ruth, seated calmly in 1A, Angela standing over her, Whitaker by the cockpit, Bethany frozen nearby. Board member Julia Sterling leaned forward. "Is this live?" "Yes," Chloe said. "Confirmed." Ruth activated Emergency Escalation Protocol 2, direct line monitoring. "We're observing in real time." Back on the plane, Whitaker reached for his own device, thumbing through updates. "Ma'am." "Call me Ms. Emerson," Ruth said, tone sharpening. "We're well past casual now." The PA system dinged softly. Boarding was frozen. Ground crew stood at the entry bridge, unsure whether to close the door or pull the jetway. Angela's voice quivered slightly. "Why go this far?" Ruth stood up. Not aggressively, but deliberately. "Because someone tried to make me disappear," she said. "And I don't vanish. Not from systems, not from memory, and certainly not from accountability." The lighting above them flickered, a subtle shift as the cabin camera adjusted to track facial cues. Elijah's phone buzzed. His stream crossed 100,000 viewers. At that exact moment, Chloe's voice came softly through Ruth's discreet earpiece. "Board is online. You're live." Ruth nodded almost imperceptibly. Then she turned to the captain. "Let me ask you directly, who authorized the flag on my profile?" Whitaker hesitated. "I don't know." "Someone does," Ruth said, "because that action had to be approved within 5 minutes of my scan at the gate, meaning either you, a ground supervisor, or someone in in-flight command authorized the downgrade." Angela's hands were now behind her back, fingers twitching. Ruth turned slightly, addressing both Angela and Bethany. "You're both senior staff. You're telling me neither of you noticed the sudden absence of a first-class manifest entry?" Bethany looked down. "We were just following the prompts." "Prompted by what?" Ruth pressed. "A name? A color? A hunch?" No one answered. Then Ruth added quietly, "This feed is being reviewed by the board. Every word, every action. You are no longer operating in the dark." Angela glanced around, as if realizing the cabin itself had turned on her. A passenger in 2D murmured, "I knew something was off." Whitaker took a breath. "If this was a mistake, we'll correct it." "It's already corrected," Ruth replied. "Now we investigate it." Just then, Chloe's voice came through again. "Security logs confirm manual override on your profile 3 minutes after you checked in. Terminal 6, supervisor ID masked. We're tracing the access." Ruth gave a half nod. Of course it was masked. Cowards love shadows. Passengers now fully leaned in. This wasn't just a dispute over seating. This was systemic. Elijah, catching the shift, turned his camera toward himself for the first time. "This is Elijah Brooks, live on Flight 317. The CEO of Vanguard Airlines was flagged and erased from the system in what now appears to be a coordinated action. We're witnessing it unfold live." Angela broke. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "No one flagged you. It's a glitch." Bethany turned toward her. "No, it's not. I just saw the access trail." Angela's eyes widened. "What?" Bethany's voice dropped, but not low enough. Your login was the last one before the manifest changed." The cabin went dead silent. Ruth didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The truth, now unspooling live across the internet and in a boardroom 3 states away, did all the work. "You weren't afraid I didn't belong," Ruth said softly. "You were afraid I did." The tension inside the cabin hadn't broken. It had simply settled into a more dangerous silence, the kind that came not from uncertainty, but exposure. Ruth Emerson sat back down in seat 1A, her spine perfectly straight, her chin slightly raised. Her fingers rested calmly on her lap, but her eyes stayed sharp, tracking every movement, every shift in tone, every whisper that thought itself unheard. Angela Green moved stiffly toward the galley, whispering to Bethany in a voice far less controlled than before. "This is insane," she hissed. "People like her don't fly here, and certainly not in 1A. What she didn't realize, or perhaps forgot in the panic, was that Elijah Brooks's phone was still recording. His mic, set to automatic gain, caught every word. He didn't react. Not visibly, but his thumb hovered over the save clip button, isolating the last 15 seconds. People like her. That phrase had echoed in Ruth's life before, and as the cabin dimmed slightly for takeoff prep, the memory rushed in without mercy. 33 years earlier, Washington, D.C., boardroom, frosted glass, mahogany table. Ruth sat at the far end, flanked by 4 men in gray suits. She was the only woman in the room, the only black face, the only candidate who wasn't Ivy League, though her credentials from Howard and MIT glistened. She had spent 6 months in the pipeline, passed every exam, crushed every simulation. She'd led 2 regional turnarounds that saved Vanguard Airlines from regulatory penalties, and yet the board's tone that morning had been off. "So," said Mr. Hayden, then merely a mid-level board member, "we've all reviewed Ruth's numbers. No one doubts her competence." He smiled, as if that praise should be enough. Then came the turn. "But we're also discussing brand positioning," he added, glancing at the older white men around him. "And optics matter. She doesn't quite fit the public-facing image we've built." Ruth didn't flinch then either. She simply asked, "What image is that?" There had been a pause. Then the chairman, a gray-haired senator's cousin, chimed in. "You're highly capable, but we need someone more aligned with legacy branding." She'd known exactly what they meant. "You're smart, you're strategic, but you're black. And that makes our donors uncomfortable." They never said it. They never had to. She walked out of that boardroom without the promotion, took a sabbatical, and when she returned as a private investor, not an employee, and began quietly buying shares. She knew someday that room would belong to her. Back in the present, Elijah leaned slightly forward. "You want that clip?" he asked quietly. Ruth turned just enough to meet his eyes. "Keep it safe. We'll need it." Angela's words had stirred something more dangerous than offense: memory. Ruth knew people like Angela didn't operate in isolation. They were trained, licensed, and then reinforced by systems designed to reward that quiet, polished cruelty. From 2 rows behind, Mrs. Hayden leaned toward her husband and muttered, "She's still trying to act like she runs the place." Mr. Hayden, now late 60s, but still sharp-jawed and composed, smirked. "Let her. We crushed her once. We'll do it again." Elijah's brow furrowed. He glanced at them, thumb ready again, and caught it. Ruth turned slightly. "Do I know you?" The Haydens blinked. "I'm sure you've met many people," Mr. Hayden said smoothly. "No," Ruth said slowly. "It's not just familiarity. It's memory." She tilted her head. "You sat on the advancement committee, didn't you? Early 90s? Mrs. Hayden's face tightened. "That was a long time ago." "Indeed it was," Ruth said. "Back when optics kept people like me out of rooms we'd already earned our way into." Mr. Hayden straightened. "We made decisions based on strategy. You can't fault a company for selecting leadership that reflects its clientele. Ruth's voice dropped to a near whisper, but somehow carried across the cabin. You mean leadership that reflects your comfort zone? Angela, returning to the aisle, caught the tail end of that. Bethany was pale now, whispering frantically into her headset. Chloe's voice returned through Ruth's earpiece. Board members are reviewing old voting logs. You're right. Hayden cast the deciding vote. It's on record. Ruth didn't react. She didn't need to. The board's memory, the digital one that never forgets, was now catching up to hers. Elijah looked up. It's personal now, isn't it? Ruth shook her head. It was always personal. They just pretended it was business. Angela approached again, tablet in hand. Ms. Emerson, the gate has requested you step off to clarify your documentation. Ruth remained seated. Bethany's voice came over the intercom before she could stop it. We're currently reviewing manifest discrepancies. Thank you for your patience. Angela's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, you're creating a disruption. No, Ruth said softly. I'm exposing one. Elijah chimed in. I just uploaded the Hayden clip. 2,000 views in 30 seconds. Angela reached for her radio. We need to close the cabin. No, Bethany cut in, voice now firm. We're under executive oversight. We don't move until Ms. Emerson clears it. Angela turned sharply. You're taking her side? I'm taking the truth's side, Bethany replied, her voice steady for the first time. Ruth's eyes glinted, not with triumph, but quiet clarity. 30 years ago, they erased her with a vote. Today, they were being erased by exposure. Angela Green moved like someone who had just realized her control was slipping but refused to admit it. With forced precision, she strode toward seat 1A and without asking, reached down and grabbed the handle of Ruth Emerson's black leather backpack. The moment her hand touched it, Ruth's voice cracked like a whip. Don't touch my property. Angela didn't stop. This needs to be secured in the overhead bin. I warned you. The backpack barely moved before another voice rang out, firm and clear, from further back. Ma'am, stop that. She didn't do anything wrong. Heads turned. A woman in seat 4D stood halfway up, her face tight with disbelief. I watched her sit down like anyone else. You've been after her since the moment she boarded. Angela froze, hands still on the strap. She glanced at the woman, then back at Ruth, clearly calculating her next move. Ruth didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You are now handling corporate property. Inside that bag is a secure company device containing sensitive data. You've just triggered a compliance violation. Angela's hand shot back as if burned. Bethany, still standing by the galley, looked away, shame crawling up her neck. Elijah Brooks didn't flinch. His phone was already uploading the confrontation. As the thumbnail processed, he saw the live count tick upward. 1.2 million, 2.4 million, 3.0 million views. 9 minutes. His caption, Black CEO's bag grabbed by flight staff. First class meltdown caught live. The comments were flooding in. She's calm. Why are they wilding out? Fire Angela immediately. This is 2025. How is this still happening? Angela turned toward Bethany. You need to regain control of this cabin. Bethany didn't move. We lost control the moment you flagged her. Angela's jaw twitched. I'm reporting you to crew command. Before anyone could respond, the overhead intercom crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an unresolved issue, we'll be delayed a few minutes. It wasn't just a delay. It was a stall tactic. Ruth knew it. So did Chloe, who came through her earpiece immediately after. Ruth, we've traced the flag. You were right. Ruth didn't speak out loud. She merely nodded once, her signal for Chloe to continue. It wasn't a standard crew override. The system was accessed through a shadow credential, internal bypass. Someone tried to scrub your presence without authorization. Angela turned sharply, sensing something was happening. Are you speaking to someone right now? Ruth looked up slowly. I am. Angela scoffed. Great. So you're coordinating this circus from the cabin? No, Ruth said. I'm watching the fire you lit spread. Elijah raised his voice now, addressing the cabin. For anyone just joining, this is live. CEO Ruth Emerson of Vanguard Airlines was erased from the flight manifest mid-boarding. Now the flight crew is trying to remove her physically. We've confirmed internal tampering. Angela's head snapped toward him. You're not allowed to record? You're not allowed to violate federal discrimination policy, Elijah shot back. Pick your battles. The woman from 4D added, He's doing the right thing. So is she. You're the ones out of line. Angela's composure cracked. You people think you can scream racism, and suddenly you're untouchable. I haven't screamed anything, Ruth said. But now you've said the quiet part out loud. Bethany suddenly stepped forward. Ms. Green, she said formally, I'm invoking Article 417 of the Crew Ethics Charter. You're suspended from authority until reviewed by oversight. Angela turned white. You can't suspend me. Board protocols say I can, Bethany said. And you're no longer protected. Angela's mouth opened, then closed. Just then, Chloe's voice returned through Ruth's earpiece, louder now. Intentionally. We've confirmed an internal breach. Executive oversight is taking full control. Cabin feed is now mirrored to HQ. Ruth smiled faintly. Thank you, Chloe. Angela tried one more time. You hacked your own flight system to make us look bad, didn't you? Ruth stood. The entire cabin went still. Let me make something very clear, Ruth said, voice calm but carrying like thunder. I didn't hack anything. I designed the protocols. I built the oversight. I predicted this scenario because I've lived it. And unlike you, I prepared for it. Angela stepped back. You erased my name from a system I helped create, Ruth continued. You flagged me because I didn't match your definition of first class. But the irony is, I am the system now. And every word, every action, every mistake you've made is now preserved in the cloud, in the press, and in policy records. Elijah turned his phone toward the rest of the passengers. If anyone else has footage, send it to the address I've pinned in the comments. We're making sure none of this disappears. Bethany exhaled and whispered to herself, This isn't a flight anymore. It's a reckoning. Ruth sat back down. Angela stayed frozen, her hand twitching at her side, as if still trying to cling to whatever authority remained. But it was already gone, buried under the weight of 3 million views, a digital audit trail, and a woman who had come to fly unnoticed, and instead uncovered a system built to erase her. Captain Tom Whitaker re-entered the cabin with clipped steps, jaw set hard. His composure had begun to fray, and the whispers echoing from rows behind 1A weren't helping. He glanced at Angela Green, whose arms were now crossed tightly against her chest, face flushed and defiant. Bethany stood behind them both, her head set askew, eyes scanning but not meeting anyone's. Ruth Emerson didn't rise. She didn't flinch. She sat like a statue forged in authority, gaze unwavering as Whitaker approached. We've reviewed the situation, he began, tone low but aggressive. And to ensure the safety and punctuality of this flight, you're being asked to deplane. No, Ruth said calmly. This is not optional, Whitaker snapped. You've disrupted boarding, challenged crew authority, and now the delay is costing us thousands. Ruth leaned forward slightly. I own this airline. The cabin went still. Whitaker blinked. You what? You heard me, Ruth said. I'm the CEO of Vanguard Airlines and the second largest shareholder. I don't just fly this airline, I lead it. Angela stepped up. You can claim whatever you like. I don't need to claim, Ruth interrupted. I confirm. Whitaker's mouth opened, then tightened. Even if you are who you say you are, you're not in charge on my aircraft. Chloe's voice came through Ruth's earpiece again. We're online. Emergency voting protocol is greenlit. Your go. Ruth stood slowly. Then let's put that to a vote. Whitaker blinked. What? Ruth tapped the discreet button on her cuff again. Simultaneously, 5 executives seated in a virtual boardroom 3 time zones apart received the same push notification. Urgent oversight vote. Mid-flight incident. Flight 317. Subject: CEO status challenged. Internal breach confirmed. Requesting immediate executive board response. Within 60 seconds, secure feeds activated. The hidden cameras in the cabin, part of Vanguard's security audit system designed specifically for ethical training and crisis oversight, began broadcasting to encrypted screens across the boardroom. Chloe stood at the head of the virtual room, managing feeds, identifying key cabin moments. Angela grabbing the bag. Whitaker confronting Ruth. Bethany's refusal to back Angela. Julia Sterling, head of ethics, spoke first. This level of crew misconduct has exceeded training laps. This is targeted exclusion. Another voice joined, calm, measured, and familiar. I'd like to request we hold voting until the cabin actions are fully observed in sequence, said board member Marcus Clark. Bethany's father. Chloe blinked. Sir, we're already at 4 million views across 3 platforms. Real-time impact is unfolding. Delay increases liability. Clark nodded once. Understood. But I want it recorded that no decision is made emotionally. Of course, Chloe said, and clicked proceed. Back on the plane, Ruth stepped into the aisle, but didn't move toward the exit. Instead, she turned to the first few rows. Ladies and gentlemen, she said clearly, you've witnessed what's happened here. I've been erased, questioned, and nearly removed from my own flight, all because I didn't look the way they expected a leader to look. She turned to Whitaker. And you've just stated that despite confirmation of my role, I'm not in charge. That's your stance? He folded his arms. On this aircraft, I make the calls. Not anymore, Ruth said, because now the board is watching. Whitaker's jaw clenched. The board doesn't fly this plane. No, Ruth said, but they can ground you. Angela stepped forward. You think this ends with a live stream? A few angry comments? No, Ruth said. I think it begins there, but it ends with accountability. Bethany, still near the galley, lowered her headset and took a step forward. Her voice was quiet, but firm. My father is on the board. Angela turned, stunned. What? Bethany looked at Ruth. He's not perfect, but he believes in integrity. He told me if I ever see injustice, I have to speak, even if it's uncomfortable. She faced Whitaker. And this is uncomfortable. Ruth met her gaze. Thank you. Bethany nodded. Elijah stood up in 2A, camera still in hand. We're at 4.5 million views. Hashtags trending, #Seat1A, #SheOwnsAd, and Vanguard Reckoning. Angela tried to take a step forward. This flight will not move! Chloe's voice boomed into Ruth's earpiece, then echoed through the cabin via Ruth's external speaker link. Until the emergency vote is finalized. Angela stopped mid-step. So did Whitaker. Chloe continued, now addressing everyone. Captain Whitaker, Angela Green, Bethany Clark, your actions are under direct review by the board of Vanguard Airlines. You are being recorded. Every action you take from this moment forward may be used in legal or disciplinary proceedings. Whitaker looked down, then to Ruth. This is overkill. No, Ruth said. This is overdue. Bethany glanced at her tablet. Voting update, 4 board members in. 3 votes to suspend Captain Whitaker pending investigation. 3 votes to remove Angela Green from active duty, effective immediately. Angela's hands dropped. No, you can't do this. I have tenure. You had power, Ruth said. You chose how to use it. A moment later, Bethany's screen pinged again. 5th vote in. Motion passed. Effective immediately, authority of Captain Tom Whitaker and Flight Supervisor Angela Green is revoked. Security protocol initiated. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A man in 3B clapped once, then stopped awkwardly. The woman in 4D gave him a nod of encouragement, then joined in. Within seconds, a wave of quiet applause spread. Not loud, not triumphant, but restorative. Ruth didn't smile. She simply turned to Chloe's voice in her ear. "Send security to meet the aircraft upon landing," she said, "and notify HR. They're not flying again." Elijah Brooks stood up in the narrow aisle between rows 1 and 2, raising his phone slightly higher now. His voice, calm and deliberate, sliced through the tense silence that followed the suspension of the flight crew. "For those of you just tuning in," he said into the camera, "this woman right here, Ruth Emerson, isn't just a passenger. She's not just some random woman they tried to kick off the plane. She's the CEO of Vanguard Airlines, one of the founding executives. And today, they erased her name from the system and tried to remove her from her own company's flight." The cabin fell into stunned silence. No movement, just silence. And then a wave of slow, audible realization. The woman who had quietly boarded, carrying nothing but a black backpack and grace, had just been revealed as the very person responsible for this airline's future. A man in 3C leaned forward, mouth open. "Wait, what?" Bethany, standing near the service galley, covered her mouth with one hand. Her eyes filled instantly. Angela had just been suspended. The captain was stripped of command. And now this? Bethany's voice cracked. I didn't know." Ruth turned slowly in her seat and looked at her. "That's the point, isn't it? You didn't know. But you assumed." Bethany wiped her eyes quickly, nodding. "I'm sorry." Ruth didn't reply. Not yet. Behind Elijah, murmurs broke out across the rows. "She's the CEO? Unbelievable. They tried to throw her off the plane. Of her own airline." A woman in row 5 whispered to her husband, "That's the same woman from the congressional hearing last year. Remember? Ethics in air travel." He nodded grimly. The gravity of the moment settled in. No one could pretend this was just a seating issue anymore. Suddenly, a quiet voice from row 6 spoke up. Calm, smooth, with a slight Midwestern lilt. "If I may," the man said, standing slowly and adjusting his glasses. He was tall, African-American, dressed in a soft gray blazer, jeans, and no tie. He had the kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but commanded it once you noticed. "My name is Malcolm Reed," he said, pulling a slim wallet from his inside pocket and flipping it open. "I'm a federal civil rights attorney with the Department of Justice." The cabin held its breath. "I specialize," he continued, "in discrimination cases involving public accommodations, transport systems, and systemic racial bias." He turned toward Ruth and gave a slight nod. "I've followed your work, Ms. Emerson," he said. "It's an honor." Ruth raised an eyebrow, but didn't speak. Not yet. Malcolm turned toward the rest of the passengers. "What I've witnessed in the last hour includes possible violations of the Civil Rights Act, FAA regulation breaches, and systemic negligence. The removal of a manifest entry, targeted exclusion from a paid seat, and statements captured on multiple recordings constitute more than misconduct. They point toward institutional bias." Angela, seated in the rear jump seat now under watch, turned pale. "You're filing a complaint?" Elijah asked, lowering his phone for the first time. Malcolm nodded. "More than a complaint, a federal brief." Ruth's eyes met his. "I didn't ask for that." "You didn't have to," he said. "The evidence asked for you." The woman from 4D whispered, "Good. About damn time someone stands up." Malcolm nodded toward Elijah. "Do you have time-stamped footage, audio, and full chronology?" "Everything," Elijah said. "Backed up twice. Already stored in cloud." "Send it to me," Malcolm said. "I'll forward to DOJ channels as preliminary evidence." Ruth sat very still. The board was watching. The cabin was recording. Now the Department of Justice was documenting. What began as humiliation was quickly becoming an institutional reckoning. A passenger in row 7 raised their phone and asked, "Ma'am, what do you want us to do?" Ruth looked at her for a long moment. Then she answered, voice low but resonant. "I want you to remember what you saw here. Not for me, for yourselves. Because silence makes these things invisible, and what's invisible never changes. Bethany, still shaken, stepped forward. Can I do anything? Ruth looked her in the eyes. Speak, when it's hard, especially then. Bethany nodded. In the rear of the plane, Angela's headset buzzed, but no one answered her anymore. In the boardroom, hundreds of miles away, Chloe stood before the screen and turned toward Marcus Clark, Bethany's father. You seeing this? She asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, I didn't know my daughter still had that in her. Chloe smiled slightly. Seems she learned the right thing anyway. Malcolm pulled out a notepad and began jotting notes. This plane is now a federal scene, he said quietly. What happens next will set precedent. And Ruth, CEO, survivor, strategist, sat quietly in seat 1A. Not because she'd won, but because now, finally, the real battle was beginning. The announcement came through not the intercom, but Ruth's discreet earpiece, Chloe's voice crisp and businesslike, barely concealing the storm that was now gathering behind the scenes. Board vote finalized, she said. Effective immediately, Captain Thomas Whitaker, Flight Supervisor Angela Green, and Flight Attendant Bethany Clark are suspended from duty pending full investigation. Ruth nodded once and looked up. Then she stood. Every eye in the cabin turned to her. I've just received confirmation from our board, she said clearly, her voice carrying not through amplification but through conviction. This flight crew, Angela Green, Thomas Whitaker, and Bethany Clark, are hereby suspended. Gasps broke out. Several passengers leaned forward. Some instinctively clapped. Others whispered variations of, finally, about time, and she did it. Ruth raised one hand slightly, asking for calm. Then she turned to Angela, who was now seated in the jump seat near the galley, arms rigid across her chest. You are no longer authorized to make decisions on behalf of Vanguard Airlines, Ruth said. You will remain seated and await removal by security upon landing. Angela opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to defend. Bethany stood stiffly by the curtain separating the galley, trembling. She opened her lips as if to speak, but Ruth looked at her, not coldly, but firmly. You may have hesitated to act, Ruth said, but you chose clarity when it counted. That will be remembered. Bethany's eyes welled. She said nothing. Whitaker emerged from the cockpit at that moment, flanked by a younger co-pilot whose face was frozen in disbelief. The captain looked at Ruth, then at the passengers, and spoke like a man already defeated. I was trying to maintain order. Ruth met his gaze, and in doing so, you violated the very system you were sworn to uphold. He didn't argue. He merely nodded and stepped back. At that moment, something in the cabin shifted. Not just relief, but the emergence of something else. Trust. A few scattered claps became a wave. Applause spread from row 1 to row 10. Slow at first, then stronger. Not a celebration, but a recognition. This was more than retribution. It was repair. Elijah kept recording, captioning his newest video. CEO removes entire crew mid-air after systemic discrimination. Justice at 30,000 feet. At 6.2 million views, the hashtags #SheOwnsIt and #CabinCleanse were now trending across platforms. Ruth returned to her seat. She reached into her bag, not for her phone, not for her ID, but for her company-issued iPad. She unlocked it with a quick scan and opened the internal staff management portal. Chloe's voice returned. Ruth, while we've got a pause, something's come up. I'm listening, Ruth replied. We just pulled archived training modules from the internal learning system. A document surfaced, dated 2018. Send it to my screen, Ruth said, already bracing. Seconds later, it appeared. The header read, Passenger Risk Indicators, Behavioral Heuristics for Onboard Staff. Ruth's eyes scanned quickly. Section 3.4, Mitigating Escalation. Flight crew may use discretion to identify passengers who may not align with traditional first-class behavior profiles. Prioritize regulars and low-risk appearances to ensure cabin cohesion. Beneath that, note, less risk with regular passengers. Ruth froze. Elijah noticed her expression change. You okay? She turned the screen slightly. He read it, and his mouth dropped. That's official policy? It was, Ruth said darkly. Until this moment. Chloe chimed in again. That language was embedded in a module signed off by former HR head, who now sits on the shareholder advisory board. Trace every approval, flag every module, Ruth ordered. I want it pulled system-wide by the time we land. You got it, Chloe said. Ruth turned toward Malcolm Reed, the DOJ lawyer in row 6. We've just confirmed a 2018 document suggesting systemic profiling was not incidental. It was trained. Malcolm stood up, eyes flashing. Send it to me. That moves this into a whole new category. Civil litigation for pattern and practice discrimination. Angela, who had overheard, whispered hoarsely. It was part of training. We were just doing what we were told. Ruth looked back, not with anger, but with something sharper. Truth. And that's the problem, she said. Angela looked down. From the intercom panel, the co-pilot's voice came on. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be delayed approximately 15 minutes as we coordinate new crew arrangements and debriefing. Thank you for your continued patience. Ruth closed the iPad and looked out the window. They were still thousands of feet in the air, but the ground had already shifted, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the balance of power had finally returned, quietly, deliberately, to where it belonged. Ruth Emerson stood once more, her presence now impossible to question, her authority undeniable. She looked down at the iPad still glowing in her hand. The words from the training manual seared into the screen. Less risk with regular passengers. Then she turned to face the cabin. This wasn't a glitch, she said calmly. This wasn't bad luck or poor communication. Her voice rose just slightly, not in volume, but in weight. This was never an accident. It was policy. A ripple went through the rows. Not gasps this time. Something quieter. Recognition. You're saying they trained for this? Asked a passenger in 4D. Ruth nodded. I'm saying this airline taught its staff, quietly, discreetly, that some passengers deserved less trust, less patience, less room. And let me guess, said Elijah, standing near his seat, phone still in hand. The ones who didn't look first class? Exactly, Ruth replied. Malcolm Reed, the federal attorney, had already pulled out his tablet, reviewing the PDF Chloe had forwarded. Language like this doesn't appear by accident, he said. It gets drafted, reviewed, signed, and embedded. Angela, still seated off duty and under observation, muttered, It was buried deep in the onboarding. Most of us never even questioned it. That's the point, Ruth said. You weren't supposed to. Bethany stood at the galley divider, frozen, her lips slightly parted. Across the cabin, more voices began to rise. First one, then another. A black woman in 3C lifted her hand. 2 years ago, I was asked to prove my first-class ticket twice before I could board. My white coworker walked right past. A Latino man from 6B spoke up. I was told my upgrade was unlikely, even after it cleared. They tried to push me back to economy. A Middle Eastern woman from row 7 raised her phone. I have video from last month, same airline. My father was stopped at the gate, questioned about why he needed a priority boarding pass. Elijah turned to them all. Send everything to the DOJ link I pinned. Now. Malcolm nodded. Pattern and practice cases require volume. This is building something bigger. Ruth remained steady, but inside, her blood simmered. She'd known there was rot, but she hadn't known how deep it ran. Or maybe she had. Maybe she just hadn't let herself look until it hit her directly. Then came the next wave. Chloe's voice returned through the earpiece, this time measured, serious. Ruth, we found something else. Ruth stepped back toward her seat and tapped to receive the file. A scanned memo. Header from 2017. Vanguard Airlines Internal Training Development. Subject line: Heuristic Passenger Risk Model, Tier 1 Approval. And at the bottom, 2 signatures. William Hayden, Training Consultant. Matthew Clark, Legal Compliance Advisor. Ruth stared at the screen. Mr. Hayden, still seated behind her in 1B, the same man who'd muttered, "Let her pretend she runs the place," just hours earlier. She turned, slowly. "Mr. Hayden," she said, voice clear. The older man blinked. "Yes? Did you write this?" She turned the screen slightly so he could see. His eyes narrowed. "That was years ago. But you signed it." "It was never implemented." "It was embedded," she replied. "Buried in a module no one noticed because it didn't say racial bias. It said heuristics. It said instinct. It said people like her don't fly here." Gasps this time, from passengers who had no idea what the Haydens were about to become. Mrs. Hayden stiffened. "We were trying to protect brand consistency." "No," Ruth said. "You were trying to protect comfort. Yours." Elijah stepped closer. "So let me get this straight. You, sitting here behind her, created the very policy that tried to erase her?" William Hayden didn't answer. Bethany took one step forward, her voice shaking. "Grandpa?" The entire cabin went still. Ruth blinked. "Grandpa?" Bethany nodded slowly. "I didn't know." William Hayden looked up sharply. "That's irrelevant." "It's not," Bethany said, louder now. "Because you taught us to observe, to identify risk. And I did. But it wasn't Ruth. It was you." Malcolm took a step into the aisle, holding up the signed memo. "This document, combined with passenger testimonies and internal system evidence, is sufficient to begin federal proceedings," he said. "And if there is any evidence this language influenced behavior beyond this incident, we're not talking about a fine, we're talking about class action." A murmur of agreement swept through the rows. Chloe's voice came back into Ruth's earpiece. "Board wants confirmation. Do you want us to open formal inquiry into William Hayden's contract?" Ruth didn't hesitate. "Yes, effective immediately." "And Bethany?" Ruth looked at her. Bethany looked small, crushed, but not guilty, not anymore. "She stays," Ruth said. She spoke up. Chloe responded. "Confirmed. Legal reviewing Hayden file now." William Hayden leaned back, fuming, his hands twitching with decades of entitlement finally running dry. Ruth sat again. For the first time in hours, she took a breath not from defense, but from clarity. She hadn't just survived, she'd revealed the system, and now it would answer. At 37,000 feet, Ruth Emerson sat motionless in seat 1A, her fingers laced gently in her lap, her posture poised yet grounded. But far below, the world was shifting, not gradually, not in whispers, but in shock waves. The first push notification came through Elijah Brooks's phone. CNN breaking news. CEO allegedly erased from own airline's manifest. Viral incident sparks federal inquiry. Seconds later, Malcolm Reed's inbox exploded with media requests. Then came the New York Times. Seat 1A incident, systemic bias at 30,000 feet? BBC followed shortly after. #She belongs here, trending worldwide. Discrimination on US. Airline raises global alarm. Elijah, standing in the aisle now, showed Ruth the screen. "It's blowing up." She didn't smile. She only asked, "How many?" He checked again. 8.4 million views. Just crossed 1 million shares. Another notification pinged. Vanguard Airlines, VAGX, stock falls 12% in early afternoon trading. Market reaction attributed to real-time viral incident involving airline CEO. Within minutes, the airline's PR team, scrambling from their New York office, issued a cold, generic tweet. "We are aware of the incident on Flight 317 and are reviewing all information. We remain committed to equity and fairness." The ratio was immediate. 50,000 replies, nearly all furious. Elijah turned to Malcolm. They didn't even say her name. They never do at first, Malcolm replied, tapping his notes. They hope it goes away. But it wasn't going anywhere. In fact, it was only about to spread further. A new alert flashed across Ruth's iPad from an internal comms relay used by executive-level contacts. From Sheila Eng, CEO, Atlas Air. Subject: Internal Policy Confirmation. Ruth, for what it's worth, we saw signs of this training model years ago when former Vanguard staff applied for positions here. They used language we didn't teach, heuristics, appearance profiling. We suspected something systemic. We just never had proof. Ruth read it twice. Then Chloe's voice echoed in her earpiece. You're not going to believe this. Atlas Air just went public. What? They just posted a formal statement confirming prior awareness of similar patterns. They've opened their own investigation. Accusations include poaching ex-Vanguard employees who brought bias with them. Elijah overheard, and his face went pale. This just became an industry bombshell. Malcolm nodded. If Atlas is stepping in, every airline is going to be dragged into the spotlight. This goes beyond Vanguard now. Ruth leaned back slightly, letting the impact settle over her like a cold wave. This wasn't just about her seat anymore. It was about the framework, the system, that had been quietly replicated across carriers, enforced through polite training modules and invisible biases. And now, it had a name. Seat 1A. Across social media, the hashtag had overtaken everything. She belongs here. Cabinode #erase. No more. Flight 317. Truth celebrities retweeted. Public figures chimed in. Activists called for reform. Airline watchdogs began issuing side-by-side comparison charts of customer complaints by demographic. Patterns emerged. Passengers from all over began uploading videos, old and new, sharing stories of being questioned, delayed, or downgraded without cause. And then came the market hit. By the time Flight 317 began its slow descent toward Seattle, Vanguard stock had plummeted 18%. Within the hour, it would hit 22%. Analysts on Bloomberg spoke in clipped tones. This isn't a PR crisis. This is a trust crisis. Vanguard's entire training culture is under review. This incident exposed the Achilles heel of the airline industry. Elijah looked around the cabin. Everyone feels it, don't they? Malcolm added, they don't just feel it, they see it. You can't unsee what's gone viral. A quiet ping sounded from Ruth's iPad again. This one from a Vanguard internal chat, reserved for board-level leadership. Board action item. Proposal to freeze all non-critical training programs pending review. Immediate audit of passenger risk modules. Internal security and ethics to report directly to CEO Emerson, effective 6:00 p.m. E.T. Ruth tapped approve. Bethany, still standing near the galley, whispered, they're cleaning house. They're trying to save face, Ruth said. But it's a start. Malcolm turned toward her. Do you realize what you've done? Ruth looked at him. Not yet. He pointed toward the screen on Elijah's phone, now showing a montage of media outlets, from MSNBC to Al Jazeera, replaying the moment she told the captain, I own this airline. You didn't just reclaim your seat, Malcolm said. You rewrote the industry's rules mid-air. From behind, Mr. Hayden, the architect of the old system, now sat slumped in his seat, eyes downcast, his wife silent beside him. Their influence had evaporated. Ruth turned back to the window. The clouds outside were beginning to clear, revealing Seattle's skyline in the far distance. Chloe's voice returned once more. Landing in 20. Press is waiting at the terminal. Ruth didn't answer right away. Then she said, let them wait. We're not done. The plane began its gentle descent toward Seattle, the cabin lights dimming slightly to adjust for altitude. But inside seat 1A, Ruth Emerson's world was anything but winding down. On her lap was the open iPad, glowing with authority. The digital interface displayed the most powerful corner of Vanguard Airlines' internal structure, executive directives. Only 3 living individuals had access. and Ruth was about to use hers. Chloe's voice chimed in. Board has greenlit your motion, standing by for full implementation. Ruth didn't hesitate. She scrolled to the Training Compliance Directive, tapped Edit, and typed only 6 words into the override field. Bias is not company culture. Then she tapped Archive Module, and the system asked for confirmation. Delete legacy passenger risk heuristics. Confirm? She tapped Yes. A loading wheel spun for 2 seconds. Then, module removed. Chloe's voice returned. It's done. HR and legal just received the kill switch notification. Ruth exhaled, slow but steady. Across the cabin, Elijah whispered into his live stream mic. She just shut down the training protocol, while still in flight, in real time. Malcolm Reed added, That's not just reform. That's rewriting the foundation. Passengers began murmuring again, not in fear, not in outrage, but in awe. Ruth wasn't waiting for committees or white papers. She was dismantling the machine from the cockpit door to the conference room. She pulled up another file, Department Leadership Directory, and began tapping names. 3 of them, the heads of recruitment, training, and compliance, were marked with red flags by Chloe earlier that hour. They'd signed off on heuristics. They'd approved discretionary boarding alerts. They'd promoted Angela Green 3 times despite a dozen internal complaints. Action, suspend. Effective immediately. Another file opened. Create new Ethics and Audit Task Force. She paused, then typed 2 names. Malcolm Reed, DOJ, Civil Rights Attorney, external appointment. Bethany Clark, Interim Flight Ethics Liaison. She paused again before typing the second, but Bethany had earned it. She didn't just apologize, she took a risk. And Ruth knew that if reform had any chance of working, it needed voices from inside. Chloe's voice returned. Confirming task force file received. Malcolm already acknowledged. Bethany has been granted level 3 internal access. She'll need mentorship, Ruth added. Assigning her to Lisa Torres when we land, Chloe replied. The internal reform director from DC. Perfect, Ruth said. Malcolm glanced toward her and gave a silent nod. She returned it. Then opened a 3rd tab. Shareholder Relations. She scrolled past the formal board titles, past the committee assignments, and landed on the section that mattered most to corporate ears, capital stakeholder voting power. Her name sat second. Ruth Emerson, 17.9% ownership. Capital Voice, Tier A1. She tapped, Compose Message. The body of the note was brief. To all members of the Vanguard Board, Shareholder Advisory, and Capital Oversight Committees, effective immediately, I am placing my entire equity stake under provisional freeze. If Vanguard Airlines does not implement structural reform, including independent oversight, public accountability, and full transparency regarding discriminatory policies, I will begin a staged capital withdrawal. My capital investment will be redirected into competitors or foundations whose ethics match their public statements. This is not a threat, it's a standard of leadership, and a line in the sand. Sincerely, Ruth Emerson, CEO, Vanguard Airlines Majority Governance Partner. She hit send. Elijah's phone buzzed again, showing the internal memo now leaked online. One of the press contacts must have received it through the company intranet. Malcolm whispered, You're putting money where your mouth is. I always have, Ruth said. The murmur of phones pinging filled the air like digital raindrops. Passengers checked news updates, and the message was already being quoted on MSNBC's live ticker. CEO threatens total divestment over lack of reform. Industry braces for ripple. A woman in 3A turned toward Ruth. Do you think they'll listen? They'll have no choice, Ruth replied. When money walks, culture follows. Chloe chimed back in. Anthony from the board just replied, 3-word response, let's move fast. That's the idea, Ruth said. Bethany, now seated 2 rows back with a borrowed tablet, looked up. What happens to the people who trained us wrong? They get replaced, Ruth answered, or retrained by people who lived what they never questioned. Elijah posted a final update before landing. She didn't just hold the seat, she used it. Reform is airborne. The pilot, now under temporary command from the co-pilot, made the landing announcement. As wheels touched down, passengers erupted again, not with cheers, but a wave of applause, soft and genuine, the kind reserved not for arrival, but for clarity. As the jet taxied toward the gate, Ruth closed the iPad, exhaled deeply, and whispered under her breath, "One more to go." 1 week later, the jet bridge at JFK was unusually quiet. There were no cameras this time, no live streams, no chants or hashtags echoing through digital walls, just a quiet boarding announcement and the familiar chime of first-class clearance. Ruth Emerson stepped through the cabin door, greeted not with confusion or suspicion, but with eye contact and sincerity. A new flight attendant, a young man with a calm voice and nervous posture, smiled as he checked the manifest. Then his expression shifted, recognition dawning. He straightened and said, clearly and with no hesitation, "Welcome back, Ms. Emerson." Ruth offered a slight smile. "Thank you." He gestured toward seat 1A. "Your usual seat." There was no confusion about where she belonged this time. No scanning delays, no furrowed brows, no preemptive questions about whether she was in the right place. Because she was. Because she always had been. The leather was still warm. The cabin was still crisp. But everything had changed. Across the aisle, 2 other passengers murmured quietly, stealing quick glances at her, not in judgment, but in reverence. They knew. Everyone knew, and Ruth didn't need to say a word. As she stowed her bag neatly beneath the seat, the same black leather backpack that had ignited a digital firestorm, she glanced to her left. There was an empty space now, not just in seating, but in policy, in culture, in the invisible frameworks that once kept people like her in the margins. Her iPad pinged softly, a message from Chloe. "Audit report complete. New protocol live at all hubs. Atlas Air adopted our model this morning." Beneath that, another message. Subject, new hire confirmation, Ethics Division. She tapped it open. "Welcome, Elijah Brooks, position, Director, Ethics and Internal Accountability." Ruth let a breath escape. Not loud, just enough. Elijah hadn't asked for a job. He hadn't needed to. His actions, his steady camera, his unwavering presence, his refusal to look away, had written his resume for him. And she'd remembered. He was no longer just a passenger. He was a witness-turned-warrior. The exact kind of person a company needed in its bloodstream if change was going to stick. Chloe's message continued. "He starts Monday. Already set up with Bethany and the review team. We're calling it the Seat 1A Initiative." Ruth tilted her head. She hadn't chosen the name, but it felt right. Seat 1A had once been a battlefield. Now it was a monument, not to position or power, but to presence. She scrolled through a few more notes, press follow-ups, leadership briefings, shareholder rebounds. Vanguard stock, after plummeting over 20%, had begun recovering, not because the scandal had been buried, but because transparency had prevailed. The market didn't just want stability, it wanted leadership, and Ruth had offered both. As she closed the tablet, the attendant returned. "Can I get you anything, Ms. Emerson?" "Water will be fine," she said, eyes still watching the runway. He hesitated a second longer, then added, "Thank you for what you did. My sister, she saw the videos. She's training to be a pilot. You gave her something real." Ruth nodded once. Then it was worth it. He stepped away. The seatbelt sign dinged. The jet engines began their slow roll toward takeoff, and then another chime. This one from the flight phone passed quietly through first class. The attendant returned. "Message for you, ma'am. Hand-delivered by courier. No digital copy." She raised an eyebrow and accepted the envelope. The handwriting was shaky, elegant, and slow. She unfolded the page. Dear Ms. Emerson, I am 85 years old. In 1960, I was forced off a bus in Alabama for sitting too close to the front. They called it a policy. I called it cruelty. I have watched you, not just in that seat, but in the silence after. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't plead. You just stayed. You sat down so we all could stand. Thank you. With deep love and respect, Mrs. Grace Whitmore, Montgomery, Alabama. Ruth held the letter still for a long time. Then, gently, she folded it. Not with reverence for the paper, but for the generation behind it. She tucked it into her blazer pocket, placed both hands on the armrests, and leaned back into seat 1A, not as a CEO, not as a figurehead, but as a woman who had for too long been asked to move, to shift, to shrink. Not anymore. Outside, the runway cleared. The clouds parted. And for the first time in a long time, Ruth Emerson lifted off without resistance. On her terms, in her seat, with her name in the system, where it had always belonged.